Hey guys, my name is Matthew. I'm really excited about our author interview we get to do today with Roger Bennett. He wrote the book Reborn in the USA. He's a Liverpudlian who now lives in America. Let's get right to it. Roger Bennett is one of the two parts of the Men in Blazers. He is a British American citizen. You've just recently received your citizenship in the United States. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's a long and arduous process. And you like talking about football, American soccer, NHL, which is hockey, and golf and all that kind of stuff. And then you've just recently written a book.
You know, Matthew, I have, and it's a joy as an English-born person with no hair to speak to an American-born person who loves England with a double portion.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. This is not something I can guess, actually, pretty consistently. If someone is over the age of 45, one of the first 5 things they're going to talk about is my hair.
Oh, mate, well, I'm 73, so let's dive into it. It's just genuinely envy. Oh. It's like individuals who wear too much Dracon wide. They wear enough for 2 people. You've got us both covered, so let's rock it.
All right. Well, tell us about your book. It's Reborn in the USA, and it's got a wonderful subtitle, An Englishman's love letter to his chosen home. Tell us about your book. Why did you write it? What's it about?
It is a story of growing up in England in the 1980s in the magical kingdom of Liverpool, which is the greatest place in the world to come from. It was a dark time when I grew up. It was a time of great turmoil under Thatcher, where the South really rose and the North really plummeted. It's a post-industrial reality for Britain, led to a real decline. Coal went, steel went, cotton went. And Liverpool was the port city where all of that had flung out into the world, really lost its raison, really became scapegoated by the rest of Britain. The rest of the world had football, it had music, but it was really high unemployment rate. It was a lot of darkness. And so to survive, I kind of made a imaginary world inside my own head by taking the American television shows, the music, the movies, the American football, the NFL, the Chicago Bears, Molly Ringwald, John Hughes movies, just all of it. Just built this imaginary kind of world which was lived in colour, whereas my own lived in black and white. If you've seen Billy Elliot, it's a little bit like Billy Elliot without the ballet dancing, or really where America played the role of ballet dancing.
All right. Yeah. So this is kind of this imaginary place in your head of America, because you didn't really know what America was.
Never been.
Yeah. Actually, one interesting thing before Liverpool, do you think that, I hadn't thought of this before, but do you think the reason that music and football did so well in Liverpool was because of kind of the oppressive nature of what was going on?
Well, they were definitely symbols of pride. We'd roll out with the football clubs. You know, Liverpool and Everton were then 2 of the best teams in Europe. Travel across Europe, take on teams in Paris, in Moscow, wherever, and you'd feel a surging sense of pride. And the music, I mean, there's no coincidence that the Beatles came out of Liverpool. Liverpool really felt so close to America, that everything that was American rolled in onto British shores through the port of Liverpool. So rock and roll hit Liverpool first. And in many ways, you know, Liverpool, it's the greatest city in the world to become from. I say in the book that it's got the greatest number of dreamers, storytellers, blaggers, great talkers, probably per acre of any city in the world. And we looked out to sea and dreamed of a world outside of the confines of Britain at the time. And America was a place that a lot of Scousers really dreamt of being, rather than what was behind us, which was the rest of Britain.
Yeah. Well, I guess tell me more about Liverpool. Maybe this is, so my wife and I actually got a chance to go to Liverpool last year, 2 years ago, in 2019, around Christmas time, and we thought it was a beautiful city.
It is the world's greatest city. It's a magnificent and it's refound its swagger. It's refound the sense of purpose. In America, it's a bit like Baltimore, which was a port, stopped being a port, and had to re-find itself. but without the crab cake upside. And so Liverpool took a while, really staggered. I mean, Mrs. Thatcher demonised Liverpool. She really poisoned the rest of the country. It took a while for it to re-find its purpose. It's now one of the greatest. I mean, it's amazing to me to go back, and I go back all the bloody time with my kids who treat a trip to Liverpool like a trip to Disneyland. It's genuinely one of the most thrilling and chaotic and wonderful and just hilarious places in the world. You would not have imagined that from the perspective of 1980s Liverpool. It was unemployment rate soaring. There was a massive heroin epidemic in the city. There was not a lot of hope. It was truly a dark time. And in dark times, it's a very common adolescent experience to create a fantasy world, a world that you escape to. And the one difference I'd say is I grew up in a bedroom. I had to, when I was 12, I had painted on the wall a Statue of Liberty, the Manhattan skyline, the stars and stripes. And every night I'd go to bed and fix the curtains just so a shaft of light would come through and shine on Lady Liberty's face. And I guess the only difference to me to other dreams I've had is that this is the one I really acted upon. This is the one I really made real. And ultimately, that's what the book's about. It's the story of a love of a gentleman who told himself he was an American trapped in an English bloke's body. And then without ever going there, shaping my whole identity around, the music of Public Enemy, Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, the Chicago Bears, who've been a terrible team for decades, and then just threw off their self-sabotaging past and rose up to smite all comers, which is genuinely so deeply inspirational. The television shows, Miami Vice, Don Johnson, my God, the singularity of style of that bloke who just thwart all comers, saved the world from narco threats, all while wearing pastels. I mean, it was just one thing after another taught me about the lessons about life that I needed to survive.
Yeah. Now, so here's an interesting thing. I kept expecting a twist because I knew that you eventually have to get to the United States. And especially because I actually knew ahead of time you were going to Chicago. No one talks about 1980s Chicago in a good light. It's also like the description of Liverpool. But yet your experience, going from these rose-colored glasses, then getting to America and finding out it's different, but it didn't turn you off. Tell me a little bit about that.
When I got to America, it was everything that I'd imagined and more. I was 16. I went to Chicago for the summer to hang out with my pen pal, young viewers. In the olden days, before the internet, you take a pen, which is this object, and you would write letters to a mate in another city, and you talk about your different life. I'd write about the football, he'd write about the Bears and the Cubs and the White Sox, and you talk about life. We'd send each other crap. And then eventually he invited me over, and I went over to the northern suburbs of Chicago, the same suburbs that John Hughes used as a canvas for his movies, and lived for one summer. Really, it was like ripped from when Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out. It didn't seem funny to me. It didn't seem unrealistic. It felt like a documentary of my time there. And when I went to Chicago, it was everything that I dreamed of. And more. And I swore then and there, pretty much after meeting the Chicago Bears in a late night rendezvous that was quite surreal and wonderful and life changing, I swore, even though I was just late 15s, nearly 16, that as soon as I could, I was going to move back to that city, which ultimately I did.
Yeah, that's cool. I like how you reference kind of those technology pieces because when reading your book, it does feel like a different world. You talked about when you were a kid, you sent over for the VHS of the Chicago Bears. I actually didn't know that. I lived in the UK and I didn't know that there was a different VHS for the USA versus
Yeah, whoever
UK.
invented that was an agony. You could, if you got a tape for I get instructional breakdancing VHS video sent over from America, and there was some conversion process that I had to go to so that they could work in England. That was a cruel and inhumane trick that whoever invented that crap needs to be really flogged for.
Oh, man. Yeah, yeah. So it is crazy though. You're like just talking about two completely different worlds. The world where, like you said, you have a pen pal that you're writing to with real paper versus that sounds barbaric to me.
Yeah,
You
when the
know?
when the Bears were playing, there was no internet. There was no way of keeping up with what the hell was going on. And so my best friend, we'd go into his bedroom. His parents had been either wonderful enough or too trusting to allow him to have his own telephone. And we would just randomly, when the Bears were playing, we knew they were playing on the other side of the Atlantic over 3,000 miles away. There was no internet to follow along. It wasn't on television. It was that the games were on television, but a week later. That's how it worked. You'd get the NFL, but a week later after the games had actually been played. So we would randomly just dial 312 numbers, the Chicago area code, and a beautiful American voice would answer finally. We'd be like, a total stranger, we'd be like, hello, can you tell us the Bears score? And Americans, being Americans and probably slightly enchanted with English accents at the time, would they'd stay on for half an hour. We'd be like, what's happening now? They'd be like, oh, Walter Payton's just cut outside the left hand. And he's broken. He's broken for 10. They'd give us our own personal commentary. And it was genuinely magnificent. It was as magnificent as the phone bills were sizable.
That's great. Now, your book, it has a subtitle on it, An Englishman's Love Letter to His Chosen Home. I really, really like the subtitle, but I kind of wonder about the timing of it. You kind of already referenced the America that you knew from a childhood. It's not real. So who is this love letter? Like, tell me about this love letter.
I started writing the thing in lockdown as COVID crackled across New York City, the city that was painted on my bedroom wall that I then made real and moved to. There's not a day that I do not wake up and thank God that I live here. I mean, it's just the most magnificent place in the world. But also during COVID, there was a long period when New York City was overwhelmed by the pandemic in a way that just had no peer at the time. And it was a terrifying time. It was a chaotic time. The sports that I cover shut down. So like life, genuinely, work just shut down. And sometimes when the present is dark, chaotic, unstructured, you can make meaning by retreating into the past. And as this year of challenge and chaos and division kind of spiral from one unprecedented moment to another through the Black Lives Matter summer, which was so searing, into the election cycle, and beyond. I really dug into what was to me the American dream, which is the idea around which I had organised my life. My life has been a little bit like the first half of Scarface, really. And so I kind of retraced the steps. It forced me to think about what that American dream was to me, what it is, and what it still could and should be, which is really the focus of the book. And there's a joke on my show when we have guests on, whether it's Premier League football players, NFL stars, NBA stars, movie stars. It's very common that they come on the show, they'll either have an injury, lose an important game, or the movie that they're in will flop terribly. And our guests call it the curse of Rog. And watching America while I was writing the book, it really felt like the ultimate curse of Rog, that I had just become American and then everything had kind of gone to crap. So really those are the themes that the book explores, as well as the reality that soft power, which was an American thing of wonder, really obviously I shaped my life around it. The Heart to Heart, the Love Boat, Miami Vice, and the like of it shaped who I am as a human being. There was a study that came out recently, the Pew Foundation released it, that showed that only 46% of Western Europeans think positively about America. And that was another thing that was somewhat shocking to me, that drove me to write the book, to reconnect to a time when America really did have incredible, positive, joyous, wondrous global leadership, which was really the global leadership the world cried out for at the time. So the book was really hearkening back to that, retracing the steps, and then projecting forward.
Yeah. Wow. So, so I guess as you're talking about, that
Yeah.
kind of shift that's happened over the last, 40 years or whatever, from a time when America was held in high regard and it was this, the American dream and all these different ideas, to where now we do have all this division and, like I said, Black Lives Matter and police brutality and all these things that are happening. Certain unnamed presidents that have come in and out of power and all those different aspects. Do you have kind of a message, to maybe people in the UK, that's a large portion of our audience, about, what do you see in America? What can America become still? Do you think it's possible for America to become, that dream or that imaginary country that you?
Yeah, I mean, the end of that, I'm not going to spoil the end of the book, but the end of the book really grapples with that and gives an answer. But at the beginning of the book, when you do an epigraph, that little weird page at the front of every book, where you take a quote that's deeply meaningful to you as an author and you bang it in there, and often it's like, okay, don't quite get it, skipping on. But often it kind of jumps out and you're like, oh my God. In my case, I think the epigraph actually trumps everything that follows it. I chose an epigraph that was actually too unbelievably brilliant, and my stuff pales in comparison, and I'm totally okay with that. It's from the great poet Langston Hughes, who wrote, "Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be." And I think somewhere in there, in those lines, not my lines, I wish that I could do something that was 10% in Langston Hughes territory in my life. That would be an achievement of wonder. But somewhere in there, in that epigraph, Matthew, is, I think, the truth that you're hinting at.
Yeah. Okay, a couple questions for you. In our channel, we talk about the US versus the UK. We talk about cultural differences. What are some of the biggest culture shocks that you have experienced being a lad from Liverpool, moving to the United States? What is that? What were the biggest ones that have hit you as odd?
The reality is, and again, the book is really an answer to that question. When I first landed at O'Hare Airport and drove out, everything felt so bloody familiar. It felt like I'd been there before because, I'd watched Pretty in Pink so many bloody times. It felt like the water tower that in every John Hughes movie. Everything it felt so bloody real. But the things that gave me culture shock were hilarious things, and they still do. It's never worn off, Matthew. Walking into an American supermarket and seeing 27 kinds of mushrooms. Whereas in Liverpool, there was only one kind. It was called canned. I thought all mushrooms just came in a can, sat in juice. I was like, what? What are these things? Shiitake mushrooms? Oyster mushrooms? What do you do with these? And so that was just the options. It's not worn off. Still, every day when I drive into a gas station here, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in an American gas station. This is just hilarious. So it's really the tiny things, big picture. I genuinely, from watching the hours of crap that I had watched, I was very upset that the A-Team were not cruising the streets, making the world a safe place, and B.A. Baracus was not just doing acts of just sabotage and wonder. But apart from that, everything was as it should be.
Okay, awesome. Well, guys, I really recommend Reborn in the USA. It is. Oh, you've got more. Yes.
No, I don't. I love it. You should take it away, Matthew.
Yeah,
I'm loving
Reborn in the USA.
I love it.
Awesome book. Roger is funny. It's got all the perfect British self-deprecating humor in it, and it's got paragraphs where it's serious and there's a joke slipped in the middle and you just almost miss it. I loved the book. And then it's, I think like you pointed to in this interview, it's got the serious stuff in it too. It's got the question of how do we change? How do we get better? How do we become that America that 1980s Roger Bennett would be proud of.
You're a beautiful, beautiful man. I will say, what I realised listening to you is that someone traded us. We were I was the player to be named later in the Matthew to Eastbourne trade.
Yes.
And I like that. I love that. The last thing I'll tell you, English people who watch this, because I know it's an English channel, one of the fascinating things of writing this book, being a kid, who grows up in England dreaming of America. How many Americans grow up dreaming of like listening to the Smiths, The Cure, New Order, Joy Division, and are just like, oh my God, I don't want to live in Los Angeles. I don't want to live in Detroit. I don't want to live in Boston. My spiritual home is Salford, just outside of Manchester. And I find that genuinely amazing. It was true for you, Matthew. And I guess ultimately it's just a universal adolescent thing of wonder to always wish yourself somewhere different. So Godspeed, fella.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Courage.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that content. If you do, feel free to like. We also have another channel where we do content like that all the time. Book reviews, author interviews, and kind of random tidbits surrounding reading. So if you enjoyed that, consider checking out that other channel. I'll leave a link below and also throw in right there so you can check it out. If you're enjoying the US versus UK content, we've got a crazy backlog of videos. You can go and check those out. Also, we do put out new content a few times a year surrounding the United States versus the United Kingdom. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks again for watching, and as always, stay safe out there.